new production of Starlight Express. It's kind of like Marmite. Some people love it, some people hate it. I have my own thoughts and feelings. So I thought I would sit down with you guys today so we could have a lovely little discussion about it. Hello you lovely lots, and welcome back to a brand new video here on my page. If you couldn't already guess by that intro and by the thumbnail, today we are going to be talking about the wonderful Wembley production of Starlight Express. I do have two programs to show you, but my cat is sat licking himself on my other one. So sadly, oh god, top quality camera production from me today. So sadly, we will not be using the second one for a hot minute. There we go. I shouldn't have showed the cat to you. So sadly, I won't be showing you the second one for a hot little minute. But as I said, yeah, I would like to talk about this. I feel like I've been talking a lot on my TikTok about Starlight Express, and I've already made one video about it. Not necessarily about my own thoughts and feelings on it, although I did get a little opinionated, but more about the changes that we saw for this production and just how different this new Wembley production is compared to the productions we saw, say, back when the show first came to London. And I have seen the show twice now and spent a good bit of money to do it because, my god, tickets to this bad boy are not cheap. And so I thought it was about time that I really sort of sat down and shared with you my thoughts and feelings on the whole show. So as usual, we will be breaking it down into the good, the bad, and the ugly, which gives me an opportunity to share with you what I liked, what I didn't like, and what really should be changed or should have been done differently, at least in my opinion, for this new production. So what do you say we get into this? I'm going to start by explaining a little bit about basically my relationship with the show. Sorry, a massive wasp just flew past my window. I'm very glad my window is shut. Detour aside. So I'm going to start by telling you guys a little bit about my relationship with the show and the trips I took to go and see it, as well as what the show is about, just in case you're maybe not familiar or you haven't had the opportunity to check the show out for yourself. Let's start with my relationship with the show. As I've said, I've seen Starlight Express twice, or at the very least I've seen it twice at the Troubadour Theatre and Wembley Park. I have also seen a regional production of this, which was interesting to say the least. I think this was back like 2016, 2017, so it used the older version of the script, so didn't have any of the 2017-18 updates, which I spoke about in my other video about Starlight Express, if you want to go and check that out as well. And it was literally just on like the teeniest, tiniest of proscenium arch theatres with a bunch of people who maybe hadn't quite gotten the hang of the skating part of Starlight Express. They were on skates, which you've got to give them props for, but we also did have an incident where Greaseball skated off the stage. That wasn't ideal, but they were also wearing costumes reminiscent of the costumes that are used in Germany, which are by no means the original production, but still very much in the vein of the original production, with that kind of metallic, more very train looking costume, as train as you can make a human look, shall we say. So I've seen technically two different productions of this, but only one professional production, which is of course the Wembley production. Speaking of the Wembley production, I saw it once during previews, and then I have seen it since the opening night, so I've technically seen it before and after the production was frozen. And so as you can see, if I can get my cat to move, sorry Vader, my previews program has cast rehearsal pictures in it, whereas the same page in the other program, if I can find it, has actual production photography with all of the costumes in it. So that's the only real difference I've noticed between my two trips. The story didn't change. None of the choreography changed. The show was nigh on exactly the same both times, so I don't think seeing it in previews altered what version of the show I was shown. But that's enough about me. Let's talk a little bit more about Starlight Express. Now, if you didn't know, the most recent version of the Starlight Express story features Rusty, who is a little steam engine, think of the little engine that could, who really wants to enter this big grand train race, but he's going up against diesel trains and electric trains, so trains who are far more modern than he is, in the sense that they have more power and therefore more speed and therefore are more likely to win the race. And in order to race, each of the trains, so each of the engines, needs a carriage with them. So that's when we meet characters like Pearl, who is Rusty's love interest, as well as Dinah, Belle, and Tacita in this instance. And so I think the most easy way for me to describe this is kind of Thomas the Tank Engine meets Tortoise in the Hare meets Cinderella, which doesn't sound like a convincing plot to a show, but I promise you it is. To avoid too many spoilers as to what happens, I'm just gonna leave it at that. So that brings you just about up to speed with where I'm at with the show, as well as what the show itself is about. But I do think it is time to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly, and as always, we are gonna start with the good. First things first in the good category, and it's something I always include in the good category, and that is going to be the cast. This cast is insanely talented. To have the ability to perform in the way they do and to do it on roller skates, to me, is insane. Whilst I would shout out the whole cast, we would be here for literally forever. So my top picks are Jeevan, who plays Rusty, Jade, who plays Mama, and Jaden, who plays Hydra. I didn't mean to pick all J names. They were just the first three performers who really stuck with me. Jeevan as Rusty is phenomenal. He has this voice that just, it's so smooth and so crisp and so powerful that you just cannot help but be glued to every word he sings. Jade, who plays Mama, has this gorgeous, soulful voice, and she has this maternalness about her. I don't know if maternalness is a word, but she's very maternal in the way she interacts with the kind of younger characters in the show, and I think the way she plays Mama is fascinating. She's still got this fire burning in her, clearly, and she has this ability to pass it on to the characters around her, which I thought was gorgeous. And then Jaden, who plays Hydra, I think is just so dynamic to watch on stage. He plays Hydra in this like cool, laid back way, but also he's really keen to prove himself, and he is, at least in my opinion, one of the best skaters. You cannot take your eyes off him. The speed he goes, the tricks he pulls off is just so fun to watch, and so that is why I have to shout those three out as my top picks from the cast. But of course, the entire cast is phenomenal, so don't think me shouting out these three is me saying that, oh, the rest of them are a bit dodgy. No, they are all the talent. Wow. And they are all clearly having so much fun, which is something I love to see with a show. There is nothing worse than feeling like performers are just kind of going through the motions. You really want to feel as though they are enjoying every moment of performing just as much as you are enjoying every moment of watching them. The next thing I want to talk about in the good category, in my opinion, is going to be the costumes. Now, I know this is where I might lose a few people, as the costumes have been very divisive, shall we say, with fans. Do they look like trains? No, but do I think they need to? Also no, because Starlight Express is effectively a story of a train race that takes place inside the mind of a child. It is literally a kid playing with trains. So I think it makes sense to have these really colourful, fun costumes. I also think seeing the costumes in like still pictures really does them a disservice. These costumes are at their best when they are under the stage light and on people that are moving around. The holographic fabric, the structure to them, all in context, I think looks fabulous. I've got to shout out the Freight costumes as my favourite. I'm Afraid is Great Girly. That is my favourite song in the show, which I feel like a lot of people are like, what do you want? I just think they look lovely. Hydra as well is technically a freight train, so as you can see, he has the same costume in green. But all of the costumes have slight tweaks to make them more representative of what the freight trains are carrying. So I think if I had to pick favourite costumes... Oh, but it's so hard. Do I really want to lock that in as my favourite costume? Sorry, my cat's giving me a funny look. He's like, girl, I don't know. I've not seen the show. All of them are just so good. I love them. I think the decision to have Gabriella Slade design these costumes was so fantastic. I love the colours in Diners, so maybe she's also up there with my favourite. I just love all of them. Okay, how about I just don't pick a favourite and save myself the stress? I think that might be easier. I think the point I'm trying to make is that the costumes, in my opinion, are fantastic. Again, I do agree they don't look like trains, and if you're the kind of person that really likes trains and that's why you went to see Starlight Express, I can see it being a problem with you. But I do think it gives the show a fun, campy, spacey element. You know what it really reminds me of? Space Mountain, like Tomorrowland in Florida. That's the kind of vibe it gives off, this kind of like retro futurism. I don't know if that's what Gabriella Slade was going for, but I'm going to move you guys slightly slower forward so I can sit back. I don't know if that's what Gabriella Slade was going for, but that's what I get from it, and it's an aesthetic I really like and I think works really well moving around under the bright stage lights. I think that's when these costumes look their best. I feel like another element of the show that I want to put in the good category that I know a lot of people might disagree with is definitely going to be the changes. Now, the only changes, as far as I'm aware, that are Troubadour Theatre exclusive changes are going to be the changing of Greaseball, the replacement of Caboose with Slick, and then the inclusion of Hydra. Though do correct me if I'm wrong, because this show has changed so many times, it's literally hard to keep track of. But all the other changes have happened as a result of this show being 40 years old at this point, and therefore having basically evolved like Pokemon. Lots of the changes happened in 2017, 2018 as the result of a workshop and have since been implemented in the German production. This included a slight change to some of the song lineups, as well as the gender rebalance of the cast, meaning that where it was once maybe a more male-dominated show, it's a little bit more even. This also included things like the changing of Papa into Mama, although the character stayed the same, literally just the gender of the person playing them was different. And so a lot of changes that people are mad at aren't actually changes that were directly brought about because of this new run at the Troubadour Theatre. They're actually changes that happened well before that, but because a production featuring those changes wasn't in the UK, I feel like a lot of people maybe weren't aware of them, and therefore it feels like this version of the show that we get in London at the moment is very much drastically different to what we had in London in the past, even though if you'd watched every iteration of the show between it closing in London and opening in London once more, it wouldn't feel as different. Now, of the changes I mentioned, I've got to admit that only 2 of them are changes I like. I'm going to talk about the third one in the bad category, so we will get to that later, but the 2 that I really liked is the changing of Greaseball and the inclusion of Hydra. Now, I'm going to be perfectly transparent. When I found out they had changed Greaseball to be a female role, I was like, that's never going to work. They've ruined the show. Like, what are they doing? That's crazy. Because I really like the kind of Gaston Elvis vibe that previous Greaseballs have given off. I feel like it's a character archetype that I enjoy watching in the theatre. But then again, like, I'm a Gaston girly, so like, who can blame me? And so I was really skeptical, and then Rolling Stock came on and Al Knott, who is our female Greaseball, came on, and wow, I was in love. I'm still in love. I would go back just to watch her, honestly. Like, so good. Was it a little bit jarring hearing the song sang in a female vocal range? Definitely, but you get used to it so quickly, and I feel like Al Knott has this like cocky confidence. Al Knott has this cocky confidence to her that I really liked watching. And female Greaseball also means we got Greaseball and Dinah becoming lesbians. So I'm all here for that kind of representation. I think it's what we need in a campy show about trains. And then the other change I mentioned, of course, that I'm putting in the good category is the inclusion of Hydra, who is the one that goes on to now help Rusty win the final race, converting him into a hydrogen-powered train as opposed to a traditional steam train, which I think is a really interesting concept because there was a lot of discussion about hydrogen being the fuel of the future. So I thought it was fascinating that Andrew Lloyd Webber and the team chose to make this change and chose to include Hydra as the kind of key to Rusty's success, shall we say, in the final race. And then the final thing I'm going to be throwing into the good category is going to be the atmosphere in terms of like the foyer of the show. I'm going to include some like clips or pictures at the very least, so you guys know what I'm talking about. But they achieved this like spacey disco aesthetic outside, like in the bar area and stuff, and I love it. Like, if I could make my bedroom look like that, I absolutely would. So 10 out of 10 for that. I always love a show that extends its theming beyond the theatre itself into the foyer to really bring you into it. But that is all of the good out of the way. Obviously, I could talk for hours about what I love about this show, but I highly doubt that is what you guys are here for. So we are going to dive in to the bad and the ugly. And the first thing I'm going to put in the bad category is going to be the third change that I didn't like so much. And that change is going to be replacing the character of Caboose, who was a brake train, with the character of Slick. Now, Slick has always been a character. They've always been a freight train in Starlight Express. But having them merge with the role of Caboose, I think was really interesting. If you didn't know, Caboose is responsible for sabotaging one of Rusty's first races in this great train race. He slams his brakes on to benefit Greaseball. And so instead of having Caboose fill this role in this production, we instead have Slick, who works with Porter and Lumber to sabotage the rest of the races, either by paying off the referees to make them turn a blind eye to stuff, spilling oil all over the tracks, causing crashes, things like that. Now, the reason I don't like this change is because it doesn't really make any sense to me. Like, where's their motive other than wanting to make money? Like, maybe I'm dumb, but it didn't make any sense, right? Because the way it is presented is that you've got Mama and Rusty, who are both steam trains, and then when Mama sings her little song, the freight trains are like, oh, Mama's gonna sing a song, like all this, that, and the other, and they all like gather around and get close and cozy. And like the way it's presented, or maybe this is just the way I interpreted it, was that the freight trains were all siblings. I don't know. Like it gave the impression that like Rusty is like related to Mama. Okay, she's called Mama, which I know doesn't necessarily make her his mum. So you've got Mama and Rusty, mother and son, and then you've got the freight trains who, I don't know, are their is like Rusty's cousins or something. Hello, Vader. Do you want to say hi to the camera? Probably not. But there we go, you're in my shot anyway. And then you have the freight trains who are kind of related in some way to them, and so, or at the very least, friends with Rusty. Like, they go from being like quite supportive of him, and then suddenly Slick turns on him and is like, hey, Greaseball, I can help you win. Like, I can do Rusty in if you want, like, screw this guy. And then Porter and Lumber, who are the other two freight trains aside from Hydra, are like joining in. They're like paying off the guard. Like, what's their motive? Because the only motive I can work out, other than them like wanting to win or something, is that they want to join the kind of like rolling stock gang that, Vader, this is not very easy to film with you. They want to join the rolling stock gang that Greaseball basically runs. And so I just struggled with why Slick was chosen and why Porter and Lumber kind of got in on it when Rusty's their kind of like family. But maybe I'm interpreting it wrong. So I didn't like that change. I feel like it's a very rambly explanation. We're gonna move on into the other stuff I didn't like, and we're gonna start with the skating. Now, is it very impressive to be able to perform on stage whilst skating around? Absolutely. But I do think people raise a valid point, particularly when comparing the Troubadour production to the German production, in saying that the skating is less impressive. I will agree. It is slow in places, maybe less agile than I think a lot of people picture when they think of Starlight Express, particularly when you get to the race scenes. I watch Formula One, right? So like my opinion of what makes a good race is like up here, I need fast, I need speedy, I need action, okay? And then it's just slightly too slow. They're not going fast enough, right? And I feel like it feels unfair to make this criticism because I can't skate, so like who am I to judge? But when you see the speed at which they go in, say, Germany, you can really see the difference. But that kind of brings me on to the other thing that I don't like, and that is the venue. I do think a lot of the skating problems are a result of the venue. It is very small relative to what we see in Germany with their custom built venue, and so I do think it perhaps hinders the cast's ability to go at the speed they can in a bigger space like Germany, simply because they don't have the same stopping distances. There's not as much room for failure with regards to how close they are to the audience and things like that. And because of the small size of the venue, the ramps they have to go up are also incredibly steep, which I don't think will be helping them speed-wise, because they are definitely, very much struggling to get up it at points. I will say that since seeing it in previews and seeing it later down the line of the production, their confidence on the skates has grown tenfold. They are definitely more comfortable, and that has brought an improvement in the speed and the agility of them on their skates, but it is still, I think, slower than people would expect. But like I say, I personally cannot skate very well, so I also feel really bad for making this judgment. But that's all I have in the bad category, so I feel like it is time we move on to the ugly category. I only have one thing in the bad category, and that is going to be the set itself. Now, if you didn't know, previous productions of Starlight Express in London, as well as the German production, feature a very dynamic set. You have big set pieces being lowered in, like bridges that the actors can skate across. There is also lots of different channels that they can drop in. You've got what is effectively kind of like a bowl situation in Germany, which allows them to do tricks as well as like run down it and things like that. But by contrast, the Troubadour venue does not have that. And if you go in expecting it, I can totally understand why the London production is considered underwhelming by comparison. Now, I feel like part of the reason we don't have the same set as, say, when it was, I believe it was at the Apollo Victoria when it was in London originally. The reason we don't have stuff like that is because health and safety has changed considerably. I guarantee you there were things they wanted to do and health and safety were like, no. Sadly, the health and safety fun police had to come along and spoil some of it. But I also think, again, it's a space thing. The Troubadour is not that big of a venue, and if they wanted to make the skating area bigger, they would have had to sacrifice seating for audiences, which would have driven ticket prices up. They're already expensive as is. I'm glad to an extent they went with the direction they did in terms of making it a bit smaller, even though it has hindered kind of the spectacle of it all. But other than that, I don't really have anything to put in the ugly category. All in all, I really do enjoy Starlight Express. This production of it, I think, is a really fun night out. Is it this deep, powerful, emotional story? No, but I don't think that's why anyone's going to see Starlight Express. It is a musical about singing trains, for crying out loud. There is so much stuff in it that just doesn't make sense, but I love it anyway. And so I think if you are looking for a fun night out at the theatre, particularly if you've got, say, a big age range of people you are trying to appease with what show you are going to see, Starlight Express is a fantastic night out for the family, and so for that I can't fault it. I know that this is a show people feel very opinionated about, so if you agree or disagree with anything I have said in this video, please feel free to let me know down in the comments. I would love to have a discussion about this with you, particularly if you have seen other productions of this show. If you did enjoy this video, make sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss any more stagey content. But thank you again for watching this video, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!